Tick tock, time to rock. We got one of the greatest mockers of Muhammad the world has ever seen. We've got the most prolific critic of jihad terror the world has ever seen. And here we are once again bringing you the latest news about the global jihad. Robert, before we get started, keep in mind, everyone, Robert didn't ask me to do this, but I just have to do it. We've got this critical Quran here. Tell us a little bit about the critical Quran since there's obviously going to be nothing to cover for the rest of the show because jihad is just a figment of everyone's imagination. There's going to be nothing to talk about this week in jihad. So tell us a little bit about this, which is the link to Amazon is in the description box.
The critical Quran, David, is a translation of the Quran that clarifies where many other translations obfuscate. You know, even when they don't obfuscate, the Quran itself, despite its claims, is not clear. For example, even the many exhortations to jihad, they are usually translated as strive hard in the way of Allah, which is perfectly legitimate because jihad means strive or struggle. But the primary meaning of jihad, as you and I know in Islamic theology, is warfare against unbelievers in order to subjugate them under the rule of Islamic law. That's right, David. Warfare against unbelievers. And so this Quran, when it says jihad in Arabic, it says jihad in English. Wage jihad in the way of Allah instead of strive hard. So the English-speaking reader will understand. This is one of the verses that the jihadis use to justify what they are doing. And there are many, many other things in this. For example, many Islamic apologists, as you also well know, David, will tell you, every copy of the Quran is perfect and just like every other copy.
That's what I hear.
Many, many Islamic apologists have repeated this over the years. This Quran is the first, or if not the first, one of the first, to have variant readings listed. Like you will have variant readings listed in any study Bible. This Quran has variant readings from different manuscripts listed.
So you're forcing people to be honest about the meaning of various verses and about the history of the text.
Right. And then there's commentary that is drawn from both mainstream Muslim commentators like Ibn Kathir, the two Jalals, Qurtubi, the people Muslims look to the most to tell them what the Quran means, so that you can understand how these passages are understood in mainstream Islam, and also commentary from scholars of today who are looking at the text and often finding a Christian substratum, various other substrata that illuminate some of the strange, confused, scrambled passages, of which there are so very many in the Noble Quran.
Well, I find that hard to believe, Robert, because, I mean, as you pointed out, the Quran is supposedly clear. I mean, Allah brags over and over and over again throughout the Quran that he's perfectly clear. And it wasn't until Christians pointed out some theological problems, and that's when we got some parts may not be clear. But the standard Muslim method of reconciling the claim that the Quran is perfectly clear with the claim that not everything is clear has been that Allah is perfectly clear in his commands, but his commands include things like wage jihad, and so the Quran should be perfectly, absolutely 100% clear in those areas. And if it's not, we can only conclude that it's just not clear in the ways it claims to be clear, and so Allah is the one big fat liar.
The best of schemers.
Best of schemers, best of plotters, best of planners. You know, it's funny. When I had 3 strikes just a couple weeks ago. I had 3 strikes, and you're supposed to be banned. And so I'm on Twitter telling Team YouTube, hey, you keep giving me strikes over stuff that's complete nonsense. You obviously didn't watch the videos. You obviously didn't even read the titles. You're just banning me over total nonsense. And people suspect that there might be some workers there who keep trying to get me kicked off and stuff. But it's funny because I got all these messages. Muslims are sending me messages. You see, Allah is the greatest of planners. He's the greatest of schemers. And and now I'm back on Twitter. So how great can he be, guys? I mean,
See,
right?
he's the best of schemers.
Yeah. Oh wow. All right. Well,
Jihad
so
this week, David.
what's that?
A lot of jihad, a lot of very interesting kind of stories that illuminate other aspects of jihad and Islam that we have not touched on in earlier installments of this wonderful program.
You mean after all these shows we've done telling people about jihad, there's still yet more to be covered? Everyone be sure to get Robert's book, The History of Jihad, and be sure to get the Critical Quran. It's not available right now. You can pre-order it. That way you get it with the first batch that goes out.
Coming within weeks, May 3rd.
Coming within weeks, unless you're as cool as I am, and then you've already got one. So, again, link is in the description box. Be sure to pre-order a copy. All right, Robert, tell us what hasn't happened over the last week.
Well, this is a story that is ancillary to jihad, but you will see immediately how it is connected to jihad. And that is that in Raleigh, North Carolina, the Raleigh City Council scheduled a public hearing about a matter concerning the bus route in an area of the city of Raleigh, North Carolina. And Faisal Khan, the founder of the Carolina Peace Center, which is a local mosque there in Raleigh, he is enraged and is absolutely outraged that the city of Raleigh would dare to have a public meeting during Ramadan. And he says, we are not living in the 1800s. They are well aware of that. I mean, would they hold a meeting like this on Easter or on Christmas? On Passover? No, they will not do that. It's disrespectful. You need to be respectful to the community. It is shameful and disrespectful to hold this meeting during the holy month of Ramadan. Now, the first thing that immediately leapt out at me when I read this was Christmas is one day, or 12 if you want to sing the song. But usually it's the one day is the big day. For most Christians in America, Easter is one day. Easter is actually a season in the liturgical churches, the Orthodox and the Catholic churches, goes on for 40 days after that, but Easter is the primary day, is the one day. Passover goes for a week. Ramadan goes for a month. They actually, does Faisal Khan actually expect that the city of Raleigh is going to stop doing business for an entire month while Muslims, a small percentage of the population of Raleigh, observe Ramadan? And of course the answer to that is yes, because the principle is always and everywhere the same. Because the Muslims are the best of people and the non-Muslims are the most vile of created beings, whenever you're in a Muslim country, you should conform your behavior to suit Muslim sensibilities. And whenever you're in a non-Muslim country, you should conform your behavior to suit Muslim sensibilities.
Well, it'll be Islamophobic if you don't.
Precisely. But the supremacy is always assumed.
Now, notice, I mean, because you pointed out, so, Christmas, kids usually get out, like in school, kids usually get out like on the 22nd or 23rd or something like that. And then that becomes, that goes into winter break. Easter, that's on a Sunday. So they don't normally get time off unless it happens to coincide with spring break or something like that. Then you have Thanksgiving. Someday, some schools will let kids out early on Wednesday. So you'll get out at like noon on Wednesday, and then you have Thursday and Friday off. So 2 days. But notice, I mean, if we're consistent here, the people of Raleigh, and really the entire United States, should let all students off of school for the entire month of Ramadan. Mm-hmm. But notice, I mean, what's the real struggle of fasting if you're just going to sit at home and sleep all day and not actually go about your daily tasks? Right?
Well, you're asking too many questions here. Remember, chapter 5, verse 101 of the Quran tells you not to ask questions. Many people have lost their faith by asking questions.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I mean, if
you shouldn't ask.
If they expect kids to still go to school and they're not demanding that kids just get to stay home for the entire month of Ramadan, and all kids, because it would be disrespectful to have some kids go and not the other kids, then I mean, if they expect kids to still go to school, then obviously you could, go to a meeting or something like that. So this is just interesting demand.
It's a purely supremacist demand. What he's trying to do is establish the precedent that wherever there is accommodation to be given to the Muslim community, then it must be given. And that therefore, after that, whenever he asks something of the authorities there in Raleigh, they'll have to give it. The precedent will have been established. And so it seems to me that what he's just trying to do there, Faisal Khan, that is, of the Carolina Peace Center, is in a certain sense flex his muscles. He's trying to assert an authority and a priority in the city that if they grant him, he'll never let them hear the end of it.
Yeah, and these moves, by the way, are brilliant. I mean, this is a brilliant move because if you were to actually get them to go along with you, you've just crushed them and humiliated them, and you get to be a hero in your community. And if they listen to you and refuse and say, no, we're not going to do that, you get to complain that they're a bunch of bigots and racists and Islamophobes, and so they're complete hypocrites. They don't have meetings on Christmas or Easter, and yet they'll have meetings during Ramadan because they're anti-Muslim racist bigots. It's brilliant. It's like win-win. So hats off to them for that. That's a smart move.
And when they play the bigot card, then other people will rush to support them and say, yes, of course, we have to do this so that we can avoid bigotry and racism.
Smart. I like it.
Okay, let's go to Washington State. In Washington State, very strange case. And this was a murder case of Tyrone Bernard Wells Jr., who, a terrible story. He called up 911 and he said he wanted to report a murder. And this was one that he had just committed. And he said that he had killed a woman using a hatchet and a pair of bolt cutters. The police arrived, extremely bloody scene, dead woman with major trauma. And he said that he had been awake since Wednesday. I don't know how many days that was. The report, actually it was Saturday. So he was awake since Wednesday and using meth. But he also says this, very interesting sentence. He told police he had been reading the Quran before Rios, that's the victim, Randy Leanne Rios, came over and told police that verses in the Quran seemed to indicate to him that it would be necessary for him to kill Rios. He later told police, for the record, I'm not trying to throw that religion thing in there as a defense.
Well, that's good. Well, because no one has ever used the teachings of Muhammad and Allah to justify violence.
Right. This is the first time. But it's extraordinary, really, because the one thing we can be sure that police are not going to follow up on is there anything in the Quran that might have led him to think that he should kill this person? And yet, of course, there are frequent exhortations to kill in the Quran. And thus, it's actually entirely within the realm of possibility that he really did get this idea from the Quran. But that kind of thing is not allowed to be discussed in America today. It's racist, bigoted, and Islamophobic.
Yeah, no, I mean, imagine, you can say this is a situation where it seems like there's something wrong with the guy and you can't take anything he says seriously or something like that. But, I mean, you'd expect, there's so many of these cases where people are appealing to the Islamic sources to justify some horrible thing. And sometimes it wouldn't be justified by what Islam says. Sometimes people do things that aren't justified. And so just imagine a world where when someone says, here's why I'm doing it, we actually got a few people together, a little panel, even online, with people from different perspectives and have a little discussion about why the person's right or why the person's wrong. And then everyone would be informed. And then people would, if Islam doesn't allow these things, then people would know and they could stop doing those things in the name of Islam. But nope, we all just have to keep our mouths shut.
You're being too rational, David. Altogether too rational for the American public sphere today. Anyway, related incident. Not related by any connection between the people involved, but related, you'll see why. Out of France, a Muslim from Afghanistan, Sultan Mohammed Niazi, attacked 14 passersby in Villeurbanne. Sorry, I don't know how to say that properly. But anyway, or I'm not capable of doing so. Sultan Mohammed Niazi attacked passersby, 14 of them, with a kitchen knife and a barbecue fork. and he attacked one man, Timothy Bonet, 19 years old, from behind and killed him. 8 other people were injured, and he explained that he was attacking them because they do not read the Quran.
You know, when you said he was attacking them with a knife and fork, I was thinking maybe he was just hungry from fasting for Ramadan, and then
Yes.
that would be my defense, Your Honor. I just never fasted before, and I just lost my mind and started trying to eat people.
He said voices started to talk to him and tell him he had to execute these people because they did not read the Quran. Now, seeing as how the Quran says kill them wherever you find them twice, says kill the mushrikun, those who associate partners with Allah, wherever you find them. When you meet the unbelievers, strike the necks. Maybe the voices he was hearing in his head were quotations from the Quran, which he was supposed to attack these people because they did not read. In any case, he was found, of course, insane, not criminally liable. He will not face trial.
Hey, you know what would have been a cool defense if he said, "I'm stabbing you and trying to eat you because you don't read the Quran." They're like, "Wait, we're like your prophet. We can't read." That would have been a good one. And then it would be cool. It would have been cool if you were there, because if you were walking by and he's like, "I have to stab you and kill you because you don't read the Quran," you'd have been like, "Read it? I wrote my own. What?"
That's right, man. Can't say I haven't read it. Oh, they will anyway, though. All right. Speaking of stabbing, the daughter of...
What a great transition. What a great segue. Speaking of stabbing. Wow.
Well, you know, we try to have a little continuity in the program. And so it's rather than just jump to something completely unrelated, we go to the Palestinian Authority, where official Palestinian Authority television carried an interview with a charming little girl whose father is a jihad terrorist. And she said this. She was interviewed on official Palestinian Authority television. She said to her father, "I am proud of you. When I saw the video of the stabbing, I was happy." And if you see the video of this girl, I have it, of course, at Jihad Watch, she looks like she's about 8 years old. But she is happy, of course, here again, because this is jihad. The father has not committed a random act of gratuitous violence. He has committed a noble and heroic act in the cause of Allah. Nothing greater than that, as Muhammad himself said. And so, of course, she's happy.
Robert, on the topic of kids, there, I don't know if you saw this. Someone sent it to me on Twitter, but it was a video of a woman reporter walking through a refugee camp, and kids came up to her, like little kids, like 6, 7, 8 years old, and started telling her that when they get older, they're going to kill her for not wearing a veil around them. And it's like little kids in a refugee camp.
I've seen that.
And saying they're going to murder her. And then it shows a clip later as she's walking away, and they're hurling rocks at her and stuff like that. Little kids. So the little kids have already been indoctrinated. I mean, you kill someone for not conforming completely to Islam. And these are kids who you think people would be raising them now to realize there are some problems. There are some problems with your ideology and what it leads to. But nope.
People don't know in the West about this because, for the most part, people are frightened to death about it. And that's really the bottom line. You and I are talking about it, but the newspapers, the television shows, they don't talk about it because they're afraid if they do, they will get retaliation from the jihadis. And that's one of the reasons why this nonsense about religion of peace propagates. We had an example of that actually from the UK this week. The Daily Mail. The Daily Mail is, I often call it the worst paper in the Western world. It's really the most irritating paper in the Western world, if not the worst. Whenever I call it the worst paper in the Western world, I have all these people saying, wait a minute, what about the New York Times? What about the Washington Post? What about in Britain itself, the Guardian,
Guardian.
the
Hmm.
Independent, and so on. And it's true. There are plenty of papers that are even worse in the sense that they don't tell the truth. They relentlessly propagandize. You can't trust them on anything. What makes the Daily Mail even worse than them is that it reports honestly, for the most part, about jihad activity in a way that the other papers do not, that most of the media all over the West does not. But when it comes down to trying to identify why this is all happening and what the ideological well springs of it are, then the Daily Mail wimps out. And so that's why it's the most irritating paper in the Western world. It gets you some of the information, but not the salient information you need. An example of that, and an example of the prevailing fear, came this week when the Daily Mail ran a story about a teacher in the UK who was suspended because he had a mug, and I wish I knew where to get one. He had a mug for coffee in his classroom, and it had an image of Muhammad on it. So he was suspended, and the Daily Mail, in speaking about this, instead of standing up for the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression and explaining that it was not conducive to the parameters of a free society to kill people who say things or draw things that one does not like, instead they actually pixelated out the image of Muhammad on the coffee mug when they ran a photo of this chap.
Bunch of cowards.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Now here's the thing. I mean, I understand saying, hey, we don't want a distraction if this is going to upset a bunch of kids. We want the kids to be learning and things like that. But it seems like after a teacher gets brutally murdered over showing a Muhammad cartoon in France, that's when people would say, okay, since there's actual murders going on because people claim the right to kill over this sort of thing, then maybe all teachers need to walk around with this. And it's obvious the jihadis aren't going to go around killing all teachers. If everyone does it, then you're not going to be able to stop it. Remember, Robert, back in the day when people would get killed over cartoons, and then afterwards there would be an everyone draw Muhammad day, and then tens of thousands of people around the world would draw pictures of Muhammad and then post them online, and nobody would get killed.
That was the whole idea. Everybody draw Muhammad Day. Molly Norris, the cartoonist in Seattle, who went into hiding and disappeared after this because of so many threats she received. She said, they can't kill us all. If we all stood up, they wouldn't be able to do anything. Yeah, unfortunately, not enough of us have gotten that message.
Yeah, as long as you're doing a cartoon contest down in Texas, jihadis can show up. If tens of thousands of people are doing it, then there's nothing they can do, and they would eventually give up and realize, wait a minute, there's no point in getting violent over this. Especially if it's a message like that. Hey, you guys just called for the death of a teacher. Now, teachers around the world are going to come out. Same thing with you guys want to kill cartoonists for a French paper. So now newspapers around the world are going to come out and post cartoons about your if you're trying to get people to stop posting cartoons, this is going to have the opposite effect. Killing is going to have the exact opposite effect from what you intend. Therefore, stop killing, because it's only going to make things worse for you, not for the rest of us.
So they should have done. Mm-hmm. Every paper in the world should have printed the Muhammad cartoons after the first death threats back in 2005, 2006, but no.
And if they had, I do not think you would have had any of the deaths that came after. I don't think you'd have any.
Yep, I agree. Also in Britain, very interesting story this week. A lawyer actually won an appeal after he was fined £500, which is $660. And this is why he was fined £500. He said, free speech is dying, and Islamists and other Muslims are playing a central role. Because he said free speech is dying and Islamists and other Muslims are playing a central role, he was fined £500, $660, for hate speech.
Well, he got off light, if you ask me. Should have locked him up and thrown away the key for stating the obvious.
But this week he has been He has the fine apparently will be returned. If he paid it at all, but he has won on appeal. And I think, well, the irony is bitter there that he was fined for saying free speech is dying, when obviously the fine itself is an indication that what he was saying was absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
But a little bit of good news in the Jihad this week. He won his appeal.
That's good.
John Holbrook, a British barrister. In Egypt, we have a Christian who was stabbed 7 times. And what happened was he found that his 17-year-old son was being held against his will in the apartment of the Muslim next door. The Muslim next door had frequently played Quran recitations over loudspeakers and would insult Christians whenever they came near him. When this man, what's his name? Let me get his name here. Magdi Fathi Shahada Awad Allah. He went over to get his son away from Mahmoud Abdel Rahman Farghali, and Abdul Rahman Farghali instead stabbed him multiple times while screaming, "Oh, Kafirs, Allahu Akbar." Now, one would think that this could be some sort of a grudge or some sort of friction between the neighbors, but the fact that he was shouting Allahu Akbar, playing the Quran recitations before that, seems to suggest that the attack was indeed jihad related. After all, Allahu Akbar is a declaration that Allah is superior to other gods, to other religions, and it is specifically mandated to be cried out at the point of jihad attacks. Muhammad Atta himself, the leading hijacker on 9/11, wrote himself a letter psyching himself up before the hijacking, in which he says, "Don't forget to yell Allahu Akbar, because it strikes terror in the hearts of the unbelievers."
Mm-hmm. And it sure does, because now people know what that's associated with. The beginning of that story reminded me of, I never made a video about this. This is, I think I did a blog post about it way back in the day, but it was during the days of the grooming gangs, which, I mean, we're still in the days of the grooming gangs, but this is when the stories started really coming out on the internet about all the horrible things that were going on. And one story was about, you may remember this, one story was about a girl who'd been groomed and then repeatedly gang raped and was being pimped out, and her father went over to the house where she was being held, and the Pakistanis there called the cops, and the cops came and arrested the guy. They arrested the dad for trying to get his daughter away from this house where she's being drugged and gang raped.
Yeah, well, it seems as if British authorities are absolutely paralyzed by the fear of being called Islamophobic. And they sacrificed all those girls to that.
Mm-hmm. And it's weird, Robert. It's like, if people are cowards and people are just too scared to speak out, okay, shut up and get out of the way for people who aren't. But instead, they all have to unite and try to silence those of us who are willing to speak out against it, try to get us deplatformed so that there's no one to stand in the way of it. This whole world is nuts, man. It's nuts.
Ain't that the truth? And speaking of nuts.
Great transition. Robert is nailing these segues.
I know you've already made a video about him, but we need to mention, at least since it's quite jihad related, Musa Serantonio, a ISIS leader, convert to Islam from years ago, who joined ISIS, and now he has left Islam, says Islam is inherently violent, and the Quran is plagiarized.
Nice.
Which is a very interesting point that you can read about in detail in the Critical Quran.
When you said, speaking of nuts, I thought you were going to be like, there's been an attack on a nut farm and some.
No, I was thinking Musa Serantonio's got at least partway nuts here to have joined ISIS and so on. And even at that late date, at that advanced stage of his commitment to Islam, to grow disenchanted. I mean, in a very serious way, I have to hand it to him for having the courage to do that.
Because he's in a place where they can go after him.
Oh yeah, most of the time, Western converts to Islam, when they are in for a very brief period, they leave. The primary time for converts to leave Islam is within a year of converting. And it's very clear why, because they hear all this dawah about how wonderful Islam is, and they believe it, so they convert. But then once they're in, they start hearing about all the other things that they didn't get told during the dawah, that music is forbidden, that the jihad business, that is all real, that all the rest of it, wife beating, everything else, and a lot of them leave at that point. So for Musa Serantonio to stick, even after he knew all that, and to avowedly take it up, and to become one of the foremost exponents of the most virulent, violent version of Islam that's out there, ISIS itself, and then to wake up and say, wait a minute, what am I doing? Well, in a certain sense, he's nuts, but in a certain sense, he's heroic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I read that story in the Atlantic, and I've seen lots of people just say, he's faking to get out of prison or something. He's getting out of prison next year. He's already scheduled to get out of prison. They're not going to change his release date because now he's exposing Islam. If he were just trying to win some favor, all he'd have to say is, oh yeah, the de-radicalization program really, really worked. I discovered that Islam is peaceful. I don't know why. I never read the Quran before I got to prison. Instead, I wanted to make a video about this because I made one on the dual carname thing, but he also said in that article that the de-radicalization programs are a joke. He said anyone who knows anything about jihad is going to be able to refute and destroy anything they say. He said it's a joke, but what I wanted to point out in a video is, I mean, think about this. Someone converts to Islam and then realizes that it calls for jihad against unbelievers. But the idea that people who conclude that jihad is part of Islam are misunderstanding it somehow is so pervasive in the governments and so on, that they think, oh, we found a jihadi, we just have to show them what Islam really teaches, and that'll get them out of that, when it doesn't work. Whereas if you actually showed them some of the problems with Islam, if you showed them the problems with Muhammad being a plagiarist and copying this stuff from what did it say in the article? Copying 7th century fan fiction about Alexander the Great. that will lead some of them out of Islam. So it seems like you'd have much more success de-radicalizing these people if you showed them that Muhammad's a false prophet than by attempting to show them that, no, all that stuff about jihad, that's just a misunderstanding of 14 centuries of Islam's greatest scholars.
There's no doubt about that whatsoever. You're absolutely right. And the Western governments have been very skillfully sold a bill of goods by groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations and others that tell them Islam is peaceful, will set up these de-radicalization efforts that will show the jihadis how they're misunderstanding the peaceful Quran, and everything will be okay. When really all it does is, as you noted and as Serantonio noted, it just reinforces the jihadi attitudes, because they refute what they're telling them very quickly and easily. And so it ends up making the jihadis more firm in their beliefs than they were already. One would think that a group that would be responsible for doing things like that might even be on the side of the jihadis, but this never seems to occur to the U.S. government or any other government, and they keep running with these de-radicalization programs that never, ever work.
And it's bad because our leaders here, the people who run our prisons and come up with the plans on dealing with, they are literally going to get tons and tons of people killed, because you had lots of people who went away to join ISIS and then came back to their own countries, but the government had no evidence about what they did. So they don't sentence them to life in prison. They had no idea what they were doing over there. They could have been out there blowing people up, or they could have just been, helping with kids or something like that. People that the governments don't know, the prosecutors don't know, and so they'll give them some charge and they'll sentence them to 5 years or 7 years or 10 years or something like that. But they don't send them to prison for life because they don't know what they don't know what they did. They don't know the extent of their crimes, and so they'll give them smaller crimes. The guys will plead guilty. They'll say, "Oh yeah, we saw ISIS. We're not for it anymore." They lock them up for 5 years, and then they put them through a de-radicalization program, and then they release them back out into society. And they've already been releasing these ISIS jihadis who left their home countries, went and joined ISIS, then came back. They're already releasing them back into society, thinking that their de-radicalization programs work. And here you have San Antonio saying these things are a joke, man. No one's going to take these seriously. And now they're among us, waiting for the next opportunity to go on a killing spree.
And nobody's paying attention to what San Antonio is saying. Mm-hmm. And we talked about it last week. El Shafi El Sheikh, one of the ISIS Beatles, is playing the game right now and saying, now I understand as a Muslim that some of the things I was doing were not Islamic. Sure, buddy.
Smart.
And the de-radicalization people will lap that up. Mm-hmm. But San Antonio would see right through it.
You see, we're making a difference. This ISIS jihadi is telling us that we've really solved his problem and he's ready to go back out into society. Since no one ever lies over this stuff, we're good to go. Give us a medal.
David, that might be all the jihad, because for some reason now I'm clicking and I can't get back to the browser.
Uh-oh.
From Skype.
Uh-oh, I think you've been jihaded.
Yeah, something's going on here. I can't, the clicker is not working here.
Do you have a wire?
No, it's a wireless, but I've charged it up all afternoon.
All right. Well, we can always cut a show short and cover anything remaining next week when your defective equipment starts working again.
Sorry, let me. Oh, here we go. It's okay.
Yeah,
I turned it off and on again, and that was the miraculous cure-all. So, interesting thing also, since we've been talking about all these things in regard to Islam and society, the leader of the Communist Party of India, whose name is Baby, M.A. Baby. And I think he's come a long way. In any case, M.A. Baby, probably Babby or something, he says that many of the Prophet Muhammad's ideals are similar to those close to communist ideals. And that the prophets fought to create an equal society, just like Karl Marx. And I think you got a good point there, Baby, because the reality is that there is a very close connection between the vision of Islam and the vision of the radical left. For example, every time the radical left gets in power, there's a reign of terror. And they are creating the workers' paradise, the just society that is enforced by terror. And everybody's too afraid to get out of line, and they're concentration camps and everything. And that's how the workers' paradise is created. This happened in the Soviet Union, Democratic Kampuchea, Communist China, everywhere. Its Sharia is the same thing in a slow motion kind of way. You're establishing the paradise on earth, that is the law of Allah enforced on earth, the perfect society. And if you get out of line, you get stoned to death, or your hand amputated, or beheaded, or whatever. And so it's a certain kind of reign of terror in the same way. And so I think that this baby's onto something, really, because he is identifying the essential authoritarianism that is inherent in both the radical left and the Islamic vision of society.
And I think one of the reasons they are so commonly allies in the world is that the same sort of people are going to resist both of those, right? The same sort of people are going to resist communism as who will resist Islam generally, because it's going to be people who say, I don't like having every detail of my life being controlled by you guys. I don't trust you guys, and therefore I don't want you being able to control me. And so you resist that, and then it becomes this struggle where, no, we have to crush you until you accept us as the authority in all areas of life. And so that's the ongoing struggle. So yeah, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yep. Okay, in New York State, I should have actually done this one. Speaking of all the good segues, should have done this one back when we were talking about Raleigh, North Carolina, because in
Do a better
Raleigh,
job next time.
yeah, it's next week. Next week it'll be better. Everything will be okay. There won't even be any jihad. But in Raleigh, they're demanding that the city do their bidding and not hold meetings during Ramadan. In New York State, we have an example of what happens when the government gets into the habit of kowtowing to Islamic groups. And what happened was the state attorney general of New York, Letitia James, wrote a letter, a cease and desist letter, to Stephen Emerson of the Investigative Project on Terrorism, because Stephen Emerson apparently had some informants within the Council on American Islamic Relations. And so, at the behest of CARE, Letitia James wrote to him this letter telling him, do not have informants within CARE. Now, she didn't charge him with a crime because there is no crime involved. If she could have charged him with a crime, she certainly would have, because she's obviously quite hostile to Emerson and the Investigative Project on Terrorism. But what's noteworthy is that at her own website, the headline said, Attorney General James warns hate group to immediately stop spying on Muslim communities. Now, here is an elected official who is working with a group that was founded by supporters of Hamas in order to further the goals of Hamas in the United States. This is established by the Justice Department, that CARE is linked to Hamas. And she is writing to a group that is dedicated to opposing jihad terror activity and calling it a hate group, which is a designation that she got from CARE. And so we have here an example of an elected official who has completely adopted the mindset of this group that is linked to jihad terror groups.
Now, Robert, I haven't focused on CARE much in the past several years, but haven't there been tons of people connected to CARE who ended up doing all sorts of really bad things in the world and becoming terrorists and so on? So, I mean, if you really, it seems like you could say I have good reasons for not trusting the intentions of this group, and therefore, just like we could do in all kinds of situations, if you want to be an investigative reporter and go infiltrate some group, if you wanted to infiltrate whatever it may be, the KKK or something like that, you can obviously do that. So why in the name of common sense would you not be able to do that with a group like CARE? I mean, what does she think? If there's nothing there, he's not going to find anything, right? They're going to come out squeaky clean, and that will actually show that CARE is the loving, peaceful group they claim to be.
Exactly.
Don't
And
know.
so you got to wonder. And
Gotta wonder.
you have several people, you have several top level CARE officials who are doing time now for various jihad terror related activities or have done time in the past. You have nobody in the Investigative Project on Terrorism who's doing time for terror activity. Nobody. So you'd think even on that basis alone, Letitia James would think, I'm trusting the wrong group. And instead of accepting their designation of this anti-terror group as a hate group and doing their bidding by sending the cease and desist letter, maybe I should send a letter to CARE.
Well, I mean, just based on what you just said right there. I mean, if you have a drop of common sense and you hear, okay, there's a group with multiple, tons and tons and tons of connections to terrorism, and there's another group that wants to expose them. Which one do I side? I'm siding with the one with all the connections to terrorism, and I will condemn the one that's trying to expose them. Look at me, I'm such a wonderful person.
Yep. She's not a hateful bigot, not an Islamophobe. So everything is okay. All right, here's this is another very interesting story. This one is out of Israel as well as the one we were talking about earlier. The nephew of one of the leaders of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, his nephew, Musab Mutawa, he joined ISIS. And he was actually killed while fighting for ISIS recently. And in the wake of that, an Egyptian writer noted that there is no difference between Hamas, ISIS, and the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, if I were to say to you, David Wood, right now, there's no difference between Hamas, ISIS, and the Muslim Brotherhood, and any Western analyst of these issues heard me, they would say, see, there goes Spencer again, being Islamophobic, oversimplistic, and there's all kinds of nuance between ISIS, Hamas, and the Muslim Brotherhood. And to say that there's no difference between them only indicates the superficiality of his analysis. Whereas this is an Egyptian Muslim who's writing and saying this, noting this on the basis of the fact that these three groups share a common belief system, a common ideology.
What's that? What's the common ideology? I can't think of what it.
I think they're all Methodists.
or Scientologists.
Yes.
Or Rastafarian. It's one of those.
One of those. But this is the kind of thing. It's incredible. You can't say it in America today. And so this is the kind of thing that happens. Not only can you not say it in America today, you can't say it in the UK. And the general assumption is that any Muslim who is not actively trying to kill you right now is a moderate. Now, I am not saying that anybody should be presumed guilty. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty, but it's naive sometimes to assume. And this is a story of that naivete. There is a group in Britain in the colleges and universities called the National Union of Students. And the National Union of Students has recently elected a new president, Shaima Dalali, and she is from City University in Britain. And recently she has aroused controversy because she has at the top of her Twitter page, "Death for the sake of Allah is our most exalted wish."
It is, according to Muhammad.
Think, wait a minute, that maybe she's not as moderate as we assumed. But there is no mechanism for anyone in Britain or America to be able to evaluate that, because they just issue the blanket assertion that Islam is a religion of peace that has nothing whatsoever to do with terrorism. And then they assume that every Muslim they encounter thinks that.
Yeah, and by the way, Musa Sarantonio, well, he was the president of the Islamic Society at the University of Victoria when he was there. So that group is totally safe. But so here's the issue, ladies and gentlemen. We know there are tons of perfectly peaceful Muslims who just want to, worship and live their lives and go to the mosque and have the same freedoms that everyone else wants. We know that, but we also know that there are those who pretend to be that, who pretend to be peaceful, even though they want to violently subjugate you. And they're waiting for the opportunity. And so that's the problem that's caused by Islam. You cannot tell the difference between those two groups. So if you're talking to someone, that might be someone who genuinely wants peace and tolerance in the world and just wants to get along and live their lives and work and so on, raise kids. Or it might be someone who's pretending to be someone like that, but actually wants to slaughter you in the name of Allah and is just waiting for the command to come down from some sort of legitimate authority in Islam. And so that's what Islam does. Again, plenty of peaceful Muslims. I see people say, no, all the Muslims are on the same page. No, I've known Muslims that I've been friends with who later left Islam, and they didn't say, actually, I was planning to kill you the entire time. I was, David. It's a good thing I converted because I was just waiting for the opportunity. No, they genuinely believed what they were telling me about Islam, and then they saw that it was false. So there are genuinely peaceful Muslims. There are Muslims with Western values and so on, but that's the problem. You can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference because Islam encourages the violent, radical jihadis, in other words, the ones who actually take seriously the commands of Muhammad and Allah in the Quran to subjugate the world. They are told, hey, if you're in an area where you can't win, pretend it's all about peace and tolerance. That's what they're told. Pretend it's all about peace and tolerance if you're in an area where you can't win with a physical confrontation. So if they believe in peace and tolerance, they're going to behave like they believe in peace and tolerance. If they don't believe in peace and tolerance, they're going to act like they believe in peace and tolerance. Either way, they're acting the same way. So how do you know what the difference is? Well, it just puts everyone in a really difficult spot.
There you go. Bangladesh. There has been controversy lately and protests over the increasingly common practice of rape victims being forced to marry the rapist. And the protesters have noted that the rape victims are ostracized socially when they become victims of rape. And so they are in a terrible position because nobody wants to have anything to do with them. They have to marry the rapist, and then the rapist is exonerated because there's no rape if they get married. Now, the news story, and maybe the protesters aren't even aware, but all this stems from the same assumptions that lead to the hijab requirement in Islam, that it's the woman's responsibility to remove temptation from men. If she is raped, it's her fault because she failed to exercise her responsibility to remove the temptation. And so then, if the rapist agrees to marry her, then that removes the sin that she has committed by tempting the man to be raped. This seems topsy-turvy, but actually it all comes down to the fact that it is considered to be entirely the responsibility of the female to make sure the male is not tempted. And this is why we have burqas, why we have niqabs, why we have hijabs.
Yep, that's what the Quran says. Put it on so you're not molested.
There you go. All right. After that, we've got some garden variety jihad here, David, to round us out for the week.
Nothing like some garden variety jihad.
Yeah, a Muslim teen murdered his mother for talking to a man that he did not know on her phone. And he assumed, of course, that she was up to no good and had to remove the dishonor that she had brought upon the family.
Yeah, I did it. I did a video on about honor killings once, and it's still banned by YouTube for condemning honor killings. I interviewed someone who was friends with a victim of an honor killing to explain what she was going through when she was worried about her stepfather growing increasingly hostile towards her, and interviewed someone to talk about that. No calls for violence from us or anything, and yet YouTube banned it as hate speech.
Incredible. In France, a newly arrived Muslim refugee plotted to commit immediate acts of violence at the Eiffel Tower. In Cameroon, in West Africa, a priest said that his parish has been paralyzed by heavy Islamic Jihad activity in his area. In Australia, a male nurse who is a Muslim is charged with multiple counts of sexual abuse of patients. When I posted that, I got a lot of flack on Twitter from people saying, evil is evil, it has no religion. There are people who commit acts of sexual abuse from all cultures, and that is absolutely true and completely granted by me. But I specified that he was a Muslim male nurse because it has to be considered, or at least it would be if we had a sane law enforcement culture, sane political culture in the West, that these sexual abuse cases and rape cases, of which there are so very many in Europe among refugees and migrants, and this was in Australia, same thing, they are possibly related to the very thing we were just talking about you cover up so that you're not molested, which implies that if you are not covered up, you can be molested. And so all too many women are. And of course, then there are the allowances for the sexual enslavement of non-Muslim women, the captives of the right hand, many times mentioned in the Quran. And so this kind of thing is going to be the result. Now, maybe it has nothing to do with it. But the problem is that investigators are never going to tell us because they never even consider the possibility of this as a motivation. Meanwhile, on another note, New York City, Times Square, Ramadan began Saturday, and Muslims filled Times Square. And performed the prayers there and proclaimed, "We're here to explain our religion to all those who don't know what Islam is all about. Islam is a religion of peace." There's a lot of misconceptions about Islam. They're crazy people throughout all cultures, all religions, and those small groups of people do not represent the majority. This is what was said in Times Square on Saturday. Of course, the difficulty presented by it is that the crazy people in the Islamic culture and religion have plenty of textual justification to stand on when they commit acts of violence, whereas crazy people in other contexts do not have that kind of justification. But these things are so taken for granted in the West that we have a story out of France. Did we maybe talk about Louis Bernard Carcouet last week? And he said Muslims do not weaken French democracy; they strengthen it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't remember if we hit him last week or not. But anyway, Louis Bernard Carcouet, he said said that it's false that in the French election, the presence of Muslims and the transformation of French society is a big issue in the upcoming French presidential election. And he said it's being framed all wrong. Muslims strengthen our democracy, and they bring all manner of benefits to the society. And he blames the French authorities for the fact that there are so many Muslims who live apart from French society. He never deals with the fact that many Muslim leaders in France and elsewhere have said that assimilation is wrong, that one must not assimilate into the vile creation, the vile society of the most vile of created beings, as the Quran says unbelievers are. And so a lot of this ghettoization comes from the Muslim leaders, but this is not recognized generally by the Western leaders in France or elsewhere. One of the most bizarre stories comes out of Pakistan, where a woman...
Shocker. Most bizarre story coming out of Pakistan.
She told her students that she had a dream.
Oh, yeah.
In which she insulted Muhammad and was thereby murdered by those students for her blasphemy.
Yeah, they get killed for blasphemy in a dream.
Yes. Meanwhile, quite a few other sexual assault and rape cases all around Europe, Muslim refugees and migrants. Here again, it's the same thing. It may be that, there's always rape, there's always sexual assault, but only in Islam is there actual justification for it, to the extent that the rapist can feel righteous. And there are many testimonies even of the participants in Muslim rape gangs and other rapists elsewhere, quoting the Quran or saying that their religion allows them to do this kind of thing. But no authorities have ever noticed this.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before, but I was contacted by a former prostitute several years ago who said that she lived, her biggest customers were from a certain religious community who she said they would always have her recite something in Arabic right before they engaged her for services, and she had no idea what she was saying, but they always made her recite something in Arabic. And what she was doing was agreeing to this temporary marriage contract. And so it's totally halal.
I remember al-Awlaki, the famous jihad leader, Anwar al-Awlaki. There were stories after, I believe it was after he died, after he was killed, these things came out that he had hired prostitutes at various times while he was in the United States. And these stories, of course, were presented as if he's going against his principles. This is the secret life of this imam, when actually, in line with what you're saying, it's completely Islamic behavior, and I'm sure he didn't think anything of it.
Mm-hmm. And so it's this classic pattern where people in the West have a totally distorted picture of what Islam teaches, and they generally have no idea about sex with little girls or raping captives or killing hypocrites within their own religion. In other words, attacking fellow Muslims who aren't living up to some standard, taking prostitutes in for temporary marriage, marrying them for an hour or 2 or 3 hours, having sex with them, paying them, and so on. They have no idea that Islam teaches these things. And so when they hear that someone did these things, it's, you see, he wasn't a real Muslim after all, because he knew more about Islam and he knew he was allowed to do these things. That means he's not a Muslim. And we're the arbiters of who is and who isn't a true Muslim. What a world.
That's it.
All right. Well, does that wrap it up for this week?
Yeah, I got plenty more, but we have been discussing this for an hour. It's quite enough jihad for a week.
Yeah, all you Muslims who are watching, I'll say it again. We understand there are plenty of you out there who don't believe in jihad and so on. I'll remind you once again, when the people that you think are misrepresenting Islam but are simply taking it seriously, if they get to a position of power over us, then we're dead. So, assuming you're right somehow about your religion being misinterpreted by these guys, we still have to speak out against them and their ideology, because they are trying to kill us. And guess what? If they ever get their way and you start talking a bunch of stuff about Islam being peaceful and tolerant and them being wrong, they will kill you too. They will kill you too. So if you are legitimately a peaceful Muslim, we're on the same side in this. We reject your stupid fake prophet. That's true. But we're on the same side as far as being peaceful and tolerant as you are, if that's what you actually believe. So don't regard us as enemies. Regard as enemies the people who take your prophet's commands seriously. And let's all unite together and go after them. Any final thought there, Robert?
Well, David, everything that we've been discussing and more, it's all explained in the critical Quran, because everything that is jihad activity is based on the Quran and has Quranic imperatives backing it up. You can find it all right here in the critical Quran, available now for pre-order.
And once again, ladies and gentlemen, that link is in the description box. Catch you all next time. Although maybe, Robert, maybe this will be the week without jihad, because it is Ramadan. And as we all know from listening to Western journalists and politicians, Ramadan is when people grow closer to Allah and therefore would never wage a terrorist attack.
That's right. This is going to be the week.
This is the week, ladies and gentlemen.
This is going to be it. There's going to be no jihad this week.
We'll unless something really weird happens, we'll be seeing you guys after Ramadan is over. Catch you then, or next week.